This is the Mercedes SL 500 R107. It replaced the famous pagoda-top Mercedes SL, which was of course a design icon of the 1960s. Now the R107 kept that car's understated style and simple good looks, but it updated everything else when it was launched in 1971. The team, in fact, nicknamed the car the Panzer during development, and the model proved its strength when it was entered into the World Rally Championship. In 1979, it won the Côte d'Ivoire Rally, and it was on the podium of the East African Safari Rally. So perhaps it was one of the last Mercedes to be over-engineered for quality and durability. This is what makes the R107 a brilliant bet as a second-hand car, even after many miles on the road. I think it's a classic car to be respected. To find out more about the R107, I paid a visit to the SL shop in Worcestershire. Now this is a marvellous place dedicated to the continual improvement and preservation of the R107. They purchase these machines from all around the world, and they bring them back to perfect condition. They can make you an SL with the perfect spec, and of course they can sort out any problems you have with your own car. I spoke to the owner, Sam Bailey, about the R107 and what makes it so special to so many people.
I think its appeal is very broad. People seem to love the shape, love the look of it, whether they're young or old. They've got an appeal to people that use them as everyday cars, as well as couples that perhaps now want a little toy car for Sundays, and as well as those people that want to go touring to Europe and further journeys like that.
Tell me what you can do at SL Workshop to slightly change the character of the car.
Yeah, well, there are three things that we work on for customers. The first is turning them to a manual gearbox, either a 5 or a 6 speed. As you know, they nearly all came as automatics, and some people just like that driving feel of holding onto the gears, or changing the gears that they want for the up and coming bends. The second thing we're doing is we work on the ignition system, so we're putting a much more modern coil pack-based ignition system in there. We can turn up the ECU a little bit and just add a few more horsepower. And then the third thing we're doing is we're changing the suspension. So we're changing the shock absorbers, the springs and the bushing, and even the anti-roll bar to a certain degree, just to firm up the ride a little bit, which is what some drivers are looking for. Most people are preferring the sort of way that it left the factory, which is quite a floaty type of cruiser, but some people just want a bit of firmness to the ride, so we can do that as well.
I'm a lucky man. Sam Bailey's kindly lent me his beautiful 1987 Mercedes SL 500 in Nautic blue cream leather. This car has a 5-litre aluminium V8 and an automatic 4-speed gearbox. Now, naturally, to give this car a good test, I'm going to head for the hills and valleys of Wales. Well, where else would a Morgan go?
I want to give you a feel of what this car's like to drive, because I think looking at the car, you'd think it was actually not very much fun to drive. But in fact, it's the opposite. I think Mercedes engineers really got it right, because of course their first priority was to make the car comfortable. It's a cruiser, it's not a hardcore sports car. But in spite of that, the shock absorbers, the springs, the car and the chassis is very well controlled. So when you do go over a switchback or a humpback or go through a series of bends, the car recovers itself remarkably quickly, unlike, of course, the equivalent American car of the time. So actually, this is a really good, fun car to drive. I love the way it glides across the landscape. The Mercedes SL, codename R107, was one of the most successful Mercedes of all time. That is, if you count the number of years it was produced, from 1971 to 1989. But of course it was designed in the 1960s. And that was a time when the NHTSA and Ralph Nader in America was really trying to make the car an awful lot safer. And in fact, convertibles were thought to be one of the targets of the American legislation. And Mercedes knew that to make a success of this car, they had to sell an awful lot in America. So people were scratching their heads trying to come up with solutions to the convertible problem. But Rudolf Galitzendorfer and Friedrich Geiger in Germany came up with a typically Teutonic and very successful solution indeed. They decided to make the windscreen a rollover hoop. And inside this elegant pillar, of course, is a steel tube, which Mercedes say will take well over the weight of the car when it's turned over. And of course that made them confident enough to produce a convertible that was just as elegant as the ones of old, in fact even more elegant, because of course the roof disappears entirely into the boot, frameless windows, and you have this wonderful, wonderful windscreen which acts as a perfect window or a perfect picture frame in order to see the world around you in beautiful valleys like this in Wales.
Having had a hand in designing cars, I know the battle to meet regulations, and yet engineer cars that still remain attractive. I'm very aware of the compromises that sometimes have to be made. I admire the Mercedes R107 as it clearly meets the rules, and is a very safe car. Yet, it's a very elegant sports car. The contour line that encircles the car speeds up the shape. The crisp, flowing lines have hardly dated at all since 1971, and it actually looks a lot less old than the models that followed it. The R107's combination of chrome and well-surfaced body panels works so much better than more modern cars fitted with those big black rubber bumpers. Also, compared to current cars, the R107's quite light. It weighs around 1,600 kilos. This is one of the strongest and safest cars on the road, yet it still has great performance. Clearly the design's influenced by safety regulations, but it's not spoiled by them. There are some lovely details that combine form and function with elegance. For example, the front and rear indicators are ribbed to increase airflow, keep them clean, but they also look sleek and are aerodynamically efficient. The all-round visibility from the cockpit is fantastic as the top sides of the car are so low and the roof disappears completely flat into the boot. So often in some modern luxury cars, you have a feeling of not really being able to see out with thick A-pillars and very high dashboards. But that's not the feeling in this car. This car has a simplicity which gives it a lot of class, and that makes it a classic for me.
With the engine in this car, it's a case of what might have been. When Mercedes were developing the R107, they were experimenting with Wankel engines, Felix Wankel's revolutionary new engine. But in a way, at the same time, there was the pressure from California for smog levels to be reduced in Los Angeles. So there was the pressure to reduce emissions. And the board of Mercedes, in fact, decided that the Wankel engine was going to be very, very difficult to reduce emissions, so they went with the V8, the big aluminium 5-litre V8, which is in most of these SLs. And in a way, that's not a shame, because this car has an absolutely unique character. It's like being on a magic carpet that carries you across the landscape. Up in the Cambrian Mountains, where we were testing this car, they found a gold disc. It was 4,000 years old. It's called the Bank Tin Doll. And on it, 4,000 years ago, somebody drew the sun. It represented the life-giving powers of the sun. Well, I think this Mercedes SL is the same. I think what this car does is it celebrates the sun, it celebrates the landscape. And I really want one.